Welcome to the mini-module Foundations of Multi-Tiered Systems of Support, Practices Matched to Student Need. This mini-module is brought to you by Connecticut State Education Resource Center, or CERC, with funding from the Connecticut School Climate Transformation Grant. The U.S. Department of Education awarded Connecticut the grant in 2014, and CERC and the Connecticut State Department of Education subsequently undertook a statewide analysis of multi-tiered systems of support. This analysis attempted to identify strengths of implementation, as well as areas for improvement that could be targeted through improved training and technical assistance. This module will provide foundational information through which schools can improve implementation. In order to conduct the analysis of multi-tiered systems, the Connecticut State Department of Education selected the Tiered Fidelity Inventory as the instrument. The Tiered Fidelity Inventory, or TFI, was developed as part of the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Special Education Programs National Technical Assistance Center on Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports. The TFI measures how school personnel are applying the core features of school-wide positive behavioral interventions and supports. It is intended to provide a valid, reliable, and efficient measure over the 3 tiers of intervention. During the course of analysis, 175 facilitated sessions were held in schools across Connecticut, where school teams analyzed their process. Several common themes emerged from the aggregate data from items on the Tiered Fidelity Inventory. We would like to acknowledge that content and best practices were gleaned from the tool as well as resources from pbis.org and nepbis.org websites. We also want to acknowledge resources from the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning at casel.org, the Comprehensive Integrated 3-Tiered Model of Prevention at ci3t.org, as well as Kathleen Lane's text, Systematic Screenings of Behavior to Support Instruction. The goal of this mini-module is to better understand how to match intervention practices to meet student needs. Effective implementation of a multi-tiered system of support relies on school teams matching intervention practices to identified student needs. This should be a formalized process that the school team implements consistently. It should be embedded in a larger system of support, including a formalized system for requesting assistance available to the teacher, family, or the student. Matching practices to student need includes 3 major parts. First, the school team must understand the needs both of the individual student by completing a root cause analysis as well as the needs of the school over time by reviewing the aggregate data in order to ensure a range of interventions are available. The school team must also have clearly defined interventions that build on the universal foundations that exist in the school. Interventions should be fully defined, meaning for each intervention there is a clear description of the anticipated outcomes, skill development, and data associated with the delivery of the intervention. Critically examining the cultural and contextual fit of an intervention is the 3rd step in ensuring practices are matched to student need. In this module, we will be walking through each of these steps using an example to give school teams a better understanding of what this process should look like in their school. All behavior serves a function. Behaviorists separate behavior into 2 functions. The first function is to obtain or get something. The second function is to escape or avoid something. In each instance, a student may be trying to obtain or avoid, such as sensory stimulation, social interactions with peers or adults, or tangible items or activities. We can only know whether behavior is used to obtain or avoid by examining the history of the behavior. For example, the school-based team has discovered through their data review that student B is struggling. So far, they have determined that student B is wandering around the room and talking out to access teacher attention. Matching intervention to student need is more effective when multiple data sources are analyzed before intervention planning decisions are made. Discipline, attendance, and academic data are the most common sources of information that will provide insight into the skill gaps a student may have, keeping in mind that successful intervention may involve support in more than one area over time. Thinking back to our example, student B has received 5 office discipline referrals for talking out and wandering around the room within the past month. Student B has also scored below proficiency on the STAR math assessment. Additional data analysis revealed that student B could benefit from an academic intervention to understand place value and behavioral intervention to address off-task behaviors in the classroom. Commercial screening is an additional tool that may lead to a better understanding of both individual student needs as well as aggregate needs over time. School teams can use the aggregate data derived from screeners to ensure there are a range of interventions available to assist students. This use of clustering data allows your school team to determine how to most effectively use personnel to deliver interventions. Individual data for students can be useful in determining the specific needs and skills that could improve student performance. Please keep in mind that screeners are not to be used to diagnose or qualify students for specialized services. Selecting a commercial screening tool should be done deliberately and with close attention to the data they are designed to gather. In addition, the school team should ensure that the tool is valid and reliable with the population of students enrolled in the school. A tool that may be helpful in this process is the book Systematic Screenings of Behavior to Support Instruction from Preschool to High School. This provides a case example that teams may want to review to determine which screening tool could be most beneficial to your school. During the deliberations, school teams may also want to consider: what are the appropriate grade levels for the measure? What types of concerns does the measure detect? Who completes it? Has the tool been validated with similar demographics? How much time does the measure take? Are there online or electronic scoring options? Is there an intervention component? Understanding student needs is critical to finding the best intervention to support the student. Maintaining focus on the skills necessary for success will improve outcomes. Ensuring that we are determining skill needs and building those skills in intervention is how we will best support student outcomes. Skill areas to consider include social skills. The Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, or CASEL, has grouped social skills into 5 areas: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. Another set of skills are executive functioning skills. These have been conceptualized into 11 skill categories: impulse control, working memory, emotional control, sustained attention, task initiation, planning or prioritizing, organization, time management, flexibility, goal-directed persistence, and self-monitoring. Communication and academic skills should also be considered. Let's consider our example again. After an in-depth review of data, student B has been identified with specific gaps in understanding place value and properties of operations to add and subtract, an academic skill, and in task initiation, an executive functioning skill. With respect to the task initiation skill, the team has noticed that student B is dependent on others to begin activities. School teams should link these gaps to establish standards so that skill progressions and expectations can inform the team's understanding of the gaps. Please make sure you reference your local or state standard for additional guidance. Effective interventions for students who need additional support have a common set of features. Interventions should always be connected to Tier 1 or universal practices so that students are actually getting more intensive exposure to school-wide messages about academic performance and behavioral expectations. Explicit instruction and ongoing feedback are essential to the success of any intervention practice. In order to make improvements, students need to understand what is expected in a particular setting. Feedback from the implementers helps students make necessary adjustments to the steps needed to achieve the desired outcome. As students acquire new skills, it is important that there is a plan to generalize and maintain those skills beyond the space where they are taught and initially practiced. Having a clearly defined intervention assists school teams in matching students to the appropriate intervention. Here, you see an example of a common Tier 2 intervention check-in, check-out. Each intervention definition should include a description for how it meets the critical features of an intervention. As in the sample, interventions should have clearly defined entrance and exit criteria. Entrance criteria are a series of data points that describe the profile of a student who may benefit from the intervention. These data allow teams to easily determine whether the intervention is an appropriate one as it outlines thresholds for enrollment. Exit criteria are the clearly defined outcomes that determine when the student should be faded or exited from the intervention. Other critical features of a defined intervention include data to monitor fidelity of implementation and progress. In Student B's case, we can recall that the team noticed that Student B was often dependent on others to begin a task. Therefore, the team decided that check-in, check-out would be an appropriate support to improve task initiation. This intervention provides a structure that permits Student B to access adult attention. In addition, Student B is receiving support from the math interventionist in the area of place value to support the academic need. Teams may also want to complete an intervention grid like the one pictured here to see the features of practices currently in place. By listing the practices in a row across the top of the table and the common features in a column on the left side, school-based teams can quickly determine whether a practice is likely to be effective and to satisfy the function of the student's behavior. Once the grid is completed, the column below each practice will have a yes in each cell if the corresponding feature exists within that practice. If the feature does not exist, the cell is left blank. Careful data analysis is integral to deciding whether a particular practice has the features that will best support a given student. For example, for a student who wants to avoid peer attention, the team would not select a social skills club as an intervention for that student. Contextual fit can be determined only in the environment where the intervention is being used. Implementers, students, and other stakeholders will determine whether they have the resources to implement and keep the practice. A practice that was proven effective in one setting may not be feasible in another if the necessary staff or materials for implementation are not available, or if the intervention has not worked in similar settings or with similar demographics. An acceptable intervention will fit the culture of the setting and be appropriate for the age, ability, and values of the student. Lastly, it is important that the intervention actually works to impact the targeted behavior. The school-based team determined that they had the appropriate resources, including people and time, to implement check-in, check-out. Student B was intentionally matched with an adult who has a positive relationship with Student B. The team is confident that their formal process of matching Student B to check-in, check-out, and math intervention will address the behavioral and academic skill gaps identified. The team will continue to meet on a regular basis to monitor data and Student B's progress. Thank you for participating in this mini-module and working to improve the quality of multi-tiered systems of support.